Salamu alaikum. Good morning, everybody. Wait, tap, lat, skich. Resquest jabala August shadeen, tisafat mkulu, mat cookstiam, tkalt cook beat. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Thank you all for joining us. Hello, my name is Jabala, and I'm from the Secwepemc or Shuswap Nation in BC. I am a princess, hereditary princess of the Shuswap Nation and traditional medicine healer. And it's my pleasure to see you all here today for Vancouver's celebration of the Islamic History Month 2020. We have some great guests lined up today, and I thank you all for joining us. I will be your MC, and I do have a few housekeeping items that I wanted to share with you. Firstly, I do use tribal and Indigenous interchangeably, so forgive me if I don't get the terminology right for everybody. So the other thing too is I also, with Canada, I refer to it sometimes as Turtle Island. I don't know if many of you have heard that term before, but it is a term that we use for North America. Yes, and I'm really excited today because we've got some really key speakers coming in today. We've got two lovely elders from local tribal nations, as well as some other excellent speakers. Yes, so as we get started, I think it's very important that we acknowledge the lands that we are on, the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. Thank you for the use of this land. And myself also, I'm from the Shuswap Nation, so I send out big greetings to my tribal members here. It's a pleasure and a big honor to be here hosting this and emceeing for you all. I would like to start today by introducing one of our first guests. It's my pleasure to be introducing to you Elder Sequalia Wanak. As taught by her late grandparents, Sequalia supports families and shares cultural teachings and protocols within and outside of her community. Her passion is to see the Squamish culture, language, and ceremonies continue to be the cornerstone of the nation for future generations. And her language is to be, she hopes to be used, and not only by herself, but for all families, future generations in their daily lives and ceremonies. Thank you, Sequalia. Can you please address?
Kayachton, I welcome all of you to our, and my relative from Tsleil-Waututh is here, but I always say I welcome you to our unceded Coast Salish territories of Skahoot, Mishokameo, Squamish Nation, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam. And if you're in the Burnaby area of SFU, the campus is on the Coquitlam Coast Salish First Nation. And I'm honored to be able to share a few words with you and say that it's important in this day and age, as I was sharing before, that we have Inchomot and Squalwin, one heart and one mind, and that we come together to Chincha and Stwite, stand and work together, to hold each other up, support one another, help each other wherever and whenever we can, and to this is what I was taught by my late grandfather and other elders. And you come together today to be able to be Winoxus, respectful of each other and hear the words, take into your heart and minds what's meant for you. Set aside what you don't need today and maybe bring it back another day when you do need it. And to be able to share, speak about, as bear witness to what you're going to be part of today, and share the story, because today is the start of a legend of the Muslim History Month 2020. And I say it's a legend because my grandmother said legends aren't Aesop's fables or Grimm's fairy tales. They're real stories about real people. And that's what today is about. So I ask you all to come together. I'm going to share it. My grandfather shared with me that all people pray to a higher power, and that higher power is known by many different names. And when we come together, we need to respect each other's ways and our spirituality. And I'm going to ask you to have your hands open in your laps and just in chomo and squalwin, one heart and one mind. Take a few breaths and feel the energy from Creator and your ancestors. And while I sing Sequalia Slolum Ha Squal, Sequalia song greeting of the day, I ask you to pray for all of your family and friends and for the work that's happening today. And then I'll say a short prayer and then I'll turn it back over to Jabala and my relative Carlene. And right now I'm going to make apologies. I won't be able to stay with you for the day as I have other things I have to do with my family today. So I'll be leaving after my relative speaks. So let's come together with one heart and one mind. Oh, 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 hey, oh, 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 hey, oh, hey, oh, 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 hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah. Oh, 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 hey, oh, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah. Oh, oh, hey, oh, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, 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 hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, oh, 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 Hoichaka, Hoichaka, thank you. That was my ancestor, Sequalia, who I'm named after, her spiritual song that was fixed for sharing for days like this. It's a healing prayer song. And I am Sequalia, also known as Anwanek, and I live on the North Shore also. But Sequalia came from the island known as Stanley Park now, in our ancient village of Huehue, which is now known as Lumberman's Arch. So now I'd like us to say Chenquem Mentomi Kakakanek Chasiam. Yonsio so tunoy up and manman to squalls deceits, yonsio manman say sequedal chat, say yaya chat to squalls deceits, squallowing. Asking you, Creator, to watch over and guide all of your children gathered here today and their families, sequedal chat, their friends, yaya chat, with their squallow and their mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being, and to have Creator today's work be yet one halt up. Today's work is going to be excellent work, and asking Creator that you hear our prayers for all our family and friends with serious illnesses and injuries, those that may be having treatments or surgery for their health, healing, and recovery. Creator, hear our prayers for any and all of our family and friends who may have traumas and are battling alcohol and drugs. And that they find that healing path to recovery, and also those who are incarcerated because of that traumas and battles that have led them to be there, to find that healing path to recovery, and prayers for all their families who worry about them and don't want to lose them, and also for the families who have lost loved ones to that battle, to lift them up and let their spirits be eased a bit with our prayers, asking prayers, Creator, for all our family and friends who may have lost loved ones, to have their hearts lifted up and know that their loved ones are always watching over them, and send them signs like dragonflies, they say have two sets of wings because they have angels on their backs. Or maybe they say that ladybugs are angels coming to visit you. And I just read that dragonflies are kisses from heaven. So always remember that and watch for signs when you're feeling low, like maybe you see a dragonfly, ladybug, hummingbird, eagle, the yo-yo's killer whale or something. And then you smile and feel good. That's your loved one sending you that message that they are there and doing what they can in their way. So I ask again, Creator, protect all these young people and let today be a yet one health squile, that today will be an excellent day. And Tama Kwetsi, those are my words. Chen Quinn Mentomi, I'm grateful that you had me join you to start the day. Wachaya Pyo Stenamo, you all take care. I'll turn it back over to Jabala and my relative Carla.
Thank you so much, Sequali. It touches my heart to hear you sing such a beautiful welcome song. Thank you for that. Your words are very moving, and especially makes my heart open, because what you speak of is so important for this particular celebration in 2020 here. Uniting all our relations in our tribal ways. We talk about all our relations, and what that means is that there's no difference between this race or that race, or that everybody's included. So thank you so much for these beautiful reminders, and of course your drumming and your voice. It's such a beautiful thing to share. Appreciate that. So yes, I wanted to bring everyone's attention to some of the background information about this month. So the Parliament of Canada did declare October as Islamic History Month. And this is a really good time to reflect on and appreciate and celebrate the contributions of Muslims to Canadian society. We recognize the presence of Muslims in Canada, and that they're intricately tied to the global experience of settler and colonialism and migration here and also around the world. We seek to use this month to see
Jabala, my apologies, but Carlene needs to do her welcome. Carlene Thomas.
Yes, my love. We'll get to that right after I just finish my little blurb here. And then I know you two have to get going here, so I appreciate it. I'll turn it over in just 1 minute. Are you on mute? Okay. Yeah, so one thing I want to mention is that we are also honoring the resilience and achievements of Black Muslims this month. And it's a good time to reflect on joy and solidarity as well. So these are some of the themes that we're going to focus on this month. So I'm hoping that you all can pay attention to the schedule as the month progresses, and maybe join in on some of the wonderful events that Simon Fraser University has arranged for us. So yes, as Sequalia mentioned, I would love to introduce to you Carlene Thomas, our second Indigenous elder from Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Carlene Thomas is the Special Projects Manager for the Tree, Lands and Resources Department of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Ms. Thomas works on building relationships with communities and various government entities encompassed within the homeland, and waters of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. In the recent past, she worked in the Sacred Trust Initiative for Tsleil-Waututh Nation's opposition to the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. Hey. In 2003, Ms. Thomas obtained her Bachelor of Education from the University of BC through the Native Indian Teacher Education Program. She went on to become District Aboriginal Education Resource Teacher for Burnaby School District, and then later an Aboriginal Literacy Numeracy Resources Teacher for North Vancouver School District number 44. Ms. Thomas then spent a number of years in Tsleil-Waututh Nation Education Department as coordinator, teacher, and eventually as the manager of education. This department includes education from preschool to post-secondary and employment training, the administration and planning of these areas before secondment to work with the Sacred Trust Initiative. Carleen Thomas achieved 16 years as an elected council member for the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, in which she held the portfolio of community development. This department is responsible for the health and education of Tsleil-Waututh Nation community members with obvious connections to housing, economic development, etc. She also spent 1 year on the Capilano Senate as an Indigenous representative and 2 terms on the Board of Governors. Ms. Thomas currently sits on the Wild Bird Trust of BC Board of Directors, Burnaby School District's Aboriginal Education Advisory. Carleen is most proud of being married to Dave Thomas Sr. for 36 years until his untimely but peaceful passing last September. She is also a proud mother of 3 and grandmother of 4 granddaughters and 1 grandson. Welcome, Carleen.
Haichka Jabala, Haichka. O siya ni siya ay tanishwalawan, kwatsi kwatsnala ihui, anta ansakhalot, anta manas santaya I siya maksahot siyam, anta imeth kweth ansakhalot, katslahot siyam, I kweth halat, I kweth squistemos toch. Hai tsepka, meet sepkwilam, I homosquium, I swohotmish, I slavatotama. So what I said to you in the very teeny tiny bit of my language that I know called Hunkameetnam or Downriver Hulkamelam, my respected ones, the feelings I have inside are really good. I feel really good to see you and to be with you here today. In Coast Salish way, I introduce myself to you with my ancestral name. I carry the name Ansakhalot. It was given to me by my paternal grandmother many years ago. And in Coast Salish way, I also shared a little bit about my family. We do that for a number of reasons, but the most important is that it informs you, the audience, that I know who I am. I know where I come from. Therefore, I am carrying out the shahalmas, the sacred obligation or responsibilities as a Wamokta. I am a grandmother. So my parents are Ernie and Deanna George. My father is the current hereditary leader of my people, the Tsleil-Waututh people. My grandparents are the late hereditary chief, John L. George, and the late Lillian, or Dolly George, as she was known to her friends. And recently, I've been doing this kind of work for decades. And it just kind of came upon me that I never acknowledged my maternal grandparents, and it really bothered me, you know, becoming a grandmother and knowing those connections. And I came to realize it's because the 3 nations here also have to do our own reconciliation. You know, at the time of contact and at the time of colonization, our families were divided. We're divided by the government, and we're put on reserves, and we're told not to leave those reserves. Therefore, the government set our families against each other. And with the healing work, the healing of those relationships that's coming about, I'm very proud and acknowledge my maternal grandparents My late grandfather is Stan Joseph from the Squamish Nation, and my late grandmother is Caroline Nee Thomas Nee Trimble, and she comes from the Snuneymuxw or Nanaimo people, and then Kincolith or Nisga'a people up in the Nass Valley. And then I raised my hands, and in our ways, this is a gesture of welcome. Hi, Tsepka, thanking all of you. Meet Sepwood Wheelam and welcome you here to the homelands and waters of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. I just also like to give a thanks to Aslam and his organization for reaching out to us to request this protocol welcome. And that's what my Sayat, my sister Auntie Sokolia was saying, that it's important to acknowledge where you are, whose lands you're on. These are stolen lands. And people come to Canada looking for that freedom to live, to work, to make a good life. But you have to understand that the Indigenous peoples of this land have been denied that. And we're still working to achieve that equity. So my heart feels good that the Islam community has reached out to the Indigenous communities in paying us that respect and that acknowledgement. And I do hope to learn more about the group here, about this organization. As my grandfather always taught me, we'd sit at his kitchen table and we'd look out the inlet, much like the background that you see on my screen. And across the inlet, you know, there's the city of Burnaby and Vancouver, and he would say, they're not going anywhere, we're not going anywhere. We need to find a way to coexist. Doesn't mean their ways are better or our ways are better. We have to find a way to work together. And that's what Tsleil-Waututh, that's our teaching, that's our mindset, our worldview, in all the work that we do. We can't do this work alone. We need to work together. So I look forward. I'm gonna, Aslam and whoever's helping you, I wouldn't mind if there's a schedule of events, virtual events. I would truly like to learn more about the Islam community, and thank my sisters Fofalia for welcoming us all in such a good way. I do know we're on a time crunch here. I would love to share more as well, but I will leave it there. And hi, Tsepka, thanking all of you. Over to you, Jabala.
Thank you so much, Carlene. Wow, those are really powerful words. And I really want to thank you for highlighting the invitation of the Islamic community to reach out to us as tribal people. This is also very touching to my heart as well, and I hope it does open doors for other tribal people and Muslims to seek unity and solidarity with each other. As we embrace the example of local nations, I also encourage you all to join and reclaim your own traditions. This is very important because since time immemorial, the tribal nations have practiced oral traditions in delivering and passing down messages and teachings to the younger generations. These teachings often included, always included religious teachings as well as other practices. Oral messages was the way we conveyed to our children. So what's important about that is that when we learn as younger generations in a tribal way, these teachings were memorized or shared through storytelling. And I find this a really appropriate time to share with you all that I am actually myself a revert Muslim, fairly newly reverted. But I find it interesting, especially that we have in our tribal ways, our Indigenous ways, this oral tradition. And it's much like the Quran is to me, what I learn about the Quran and the oral history of it. So at this time, I feel it's appropriate to introduce our next guests and have a recitation of the Quran. And that would be Kashif Ali and Amina Jaffer for a beautiful recitation of the Quran. Are you guys on? Kashif Ali? Thank you. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. Thank you for the warm introduction. We will be reciting verses 2 to 8 of Surah Inshirah, which means solace, and is the 94th chapter from our holy book, Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, the most gracious, most compassionate. وَوَضَعْنَا عَنكَ وِزْرَكَ. And we removed from you your burden. الَّذِي أَنقَضَ ظَهْرَكَ. Which weighed heavily upon your back. وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ. And raised high for you your repute. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. For indeed with hardship comes ease. إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Indeed with hardship comes ease. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانصَبْ. So when you are free, strive. وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب. And to your Lord turn all your attention. صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you so much for that beautiful recitation. It's so lovely to see such a young gentleman practicing this, this tradition. Beautiful, beautiful voice. And thank you for your wonderful translation. In my language, we have a word, we call it lochchinam, and that means the to translate orally. So that's what we say when we want to translate something orally. And in tribal ways, it's very, very important, as it is with the Quran. It's very important that we learn these teachings, the lessons, the spiritual, the religious teachings, and that we memorize them correctly. So again, another comparison there to this beautiful recitation that I hope we can all relate to, how important it is to take these words in and really, really put meaning to them. So thank you. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker for this year's opening ceremony for the Islamic History Month 2020, Sharmake Dubow. Sharmake Dubow cast his first vote in an election October 20th, 2018, and was elected city councillor in Victoria, BC. The first Black city councillor to be elected in Victoria in 152 years. Wow. Sharmake fled his country when he was 8 years old. He was a refugee for more than 2 decades before he resettled in Canada and worked with migrants in North Africa as a dedicated human rights defender. In less than a year on City Council, Sharmake has taken great steps to make life more equitable, inclusive, and affordable for people in Victoria. He's passed motions to make public transit free, started a renters advisory committee to give tenants a voice, worked to bring an equity lens to decision-making at the city, fought for the addition of affordable housing in Victoria, and much more. He sits on various boards and committees, including the Greater Victoria Regional Transit Commission, Vancouver Island Human Rights Coalition Society, and Broadbent Institute. Welcome, Councillor Dubow. Please begin your address.
Thank you so much for having me this morning. It's such a grateful to be here. As I was being introduced, my name is Sharmake Dubow. I'm a Somali Canadian, and my name Sharmake. My grandmother gave it to me. It has a meaning, and the first letter is in Arabic, Shar, and the rest is Somali. Sharmake means that see no evil, the one that does not see no evil. So I am Victoria City Councillor at the Lungkwangan speaking people and Squamish and Songhees Nation. And I'm really grateful to be able to organize and build relationships and also live on these lands. And I came to Canada 8 years ago, and it's really important for me to really take time to speak what land acknowledgement means for me, and someone who been uprooted from my homeland, who came here as asylum seeker, and who also has been on the road for 20 years in terms of looking for sense of belonging and a place to call home. And yeah, so I want to share something now that I'm in a position of leadership, that I'm member of a newcomer community. And, you know, in Canada, one of the ways people come is through either an economic stream or through refugee stream or international students. So there's so many ways that people find themselves on this land. But sometimes, unfortunately, they don't have the history of this land. I didn't know when I came. Like the orientation I had overseas, there was nothing about the Indigenous people. So it was for me a surprise to discover the reality and the history on this land. So, and I'm still learning for the last 8 years. So I want to share a quote from a senator a Canadian senator who's Indigenous, and he was speaking to newcomers, and I love sharing this because it's really important. And he was talking about what are the role that newcomers play when it comes to reconciliation and solidarity with the Indigenous brothers and sisters. And he said, you might not have responsibility for the past, but you do have responsibility for the future, because you made a commitment to this country. And the responsibility for the future is reconciliation. So that means that you still have to understand what this history is. You have to understand what it has done to this country. You have to understand what it's doing to this country. You have to understand what we will continue to do unless we change. And the leadership from those newcomers communities. I'm a newcomer, and I believe some of participants in this room would be newcomers. Those newcomers communities that are occupying more and more leadership positions in government also need to figure out where they fit into that dialogue around change for the future, because they do fit. They're going to be influential leaders of this conversation. That was a Senator Murray Sinclair. And I think that spoke deeply to me, someone who is in a government, someone who is in a leadership position, and who is trying to educate myself every day what is the best way I could be, you know, in solidarity, but also show up for when I'm needed for the causes that advances Indigenous causes. So I wanted to share that. So thank you very much for really having me today. And I say to you, all of you, Assalamu alaikum. And the reason I love saying that is a man asked the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, what is the best to do in Islam? And the Prophet said, to give food, to greet whoever you know or not know with the greeting of Islam, peace be upon you, which is Assalamu alaikum. And also the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, worship Allah, the most compassionate, give food, spread out peace, and you enter paradise in peace. And I think it's really important, as today we see the civil rights movement, we see that the injustices that has been happening for decades, centuries, like Black, Indigenous, people of color, knew about it, and we carry that in our bodies. It's not something that we forget, but because of the Black Lives Matter that has been happening recently, that it came to the forefront of everyone's realities, like the media and people really waking up to our realities that has been happening to us for decades. So it is undeniable now that this is the reality. So, and I was sharing that because the beauty of spreading peace, because of the whole divisive and people really trying to come and say, recognize me as another human being, extend to me the same access to opportunity, well-being, quality of life, and sense of belonging. So it's really important that when we greet each other and when we have that human connection, that what are you adding to create peace? And in terms of, even if you're taking the bus, if you smile, you are creating more peace. In Africa, there is a saying called Ubuntu, and is the concept that people are people because of other people. This really speaks to our common humanity and also to our responsibility as human beings toward each other. Otherwise, our rights to be human, to be acknowledged, respected, and accepted by others. You know, many African leaders, including myself, I define myself as the kind of person who believes in the crucial importance of relationships, of human interactions, and particularly the reality that not only our human issues are interconnected, but that our life can't evolve outside of each other. So peace is what I believe is as the only and sustainable alternative for all of us. This is what every day we look forward, and when I wake up, and we can't have peace if we don't have more justice. So in order to have peace, you need to have justice, and I think that is crucial. And I think when you have peace, and it comes, and solidarity, it comes with the joy, and the joy, having the joy, you know, a lot of things happening in this world, and sometimes we forget having that joy. And joy is really like the most radical thing we can do, and it's also is really an important aspect of of solidarity, that we need to be able to laugh, connect on good things and not just in crisis or difficult things, in order to truly walk together to create meaningful change. And I think sometimes we don't remember that. And I remember one Eid, and I was looking in Instagram and Twitter, there was this hashtag that was so beautiful. It's called Black Out Eid. So young Black Muslims were celebrating, dressing the African outfit, or every country and was wearing their own. And when I say African, I mean like people of African descent on origin, and they could be anywhere, even outside of the continent. So they were dressing Eid, but in the traditional ways, and showing joy and really demonstrating the beauty of that. And I thought, wow, that is simple but beautiful. You know, of all the things happening, of the police brutality and things like that, here are the Muslim Black that showing their joy. And I don't know how many, like, speaking of joy, I don't know how many of you watch Netflix, and show by reaction in the Zoom if you watch Netflix. Okay, and how many of you have seen the special Netflix and Brian Brown Netflix special, which is a call to courage? So this reminds me that Netflix, and she's quoted for stating that joy is probably the most vulnerable emotion we experience in our lives. And I agree with that, but also I want to add that hope is as much as vulnerability as joy, in that it's emotional risk that requires uncertainty and exposure. And today we're seeing that COVID-19, people losing their jobs, you know, the inequalities, but people still have hope that they continue alive. And I think that's what our brothers and sisters for the Indigenous and the Black communities and racialized communities who have faced discrimination, racism, injustices, we still have hope that will continue every day. And I think the two are more powerful, and hope is actually more powerful because it's a very risky that you continue to do that. And that's why I'm in front of you, someone who has been a refugee for 20 years, and now I'm Canadian citizen, I'm here, I'm elected official. I think hope really propelled me to even speak to you today. And when I do my work, I'm very hopeful. And that's why at the city level, sometimes people remind you to really focus on certain things. For instance, when you speak social justice or human rights, people will tell you you need to focus on fixing potholes. Then I always like to say, I can fight for human rights, but also fix for potholes and roads, things like that. I'll share with you a story that very relevant to today's event, because I'm in 2 years at the local government, and I have brought a lot of issues and it's really built a lot of solidarity with different communities. But I don't know how many of you really followed the Bill 21 in Quebec, and that were not, that the Quebec government brought a bill called 21 see, and it was that if you have kippah or hijab or turban, then you're not allowed to to become a lawyer or a teacher or a certain professional. So the national Muslim, Canadian National Muslim Council were taken to the Quebec government, to the court, with the Sikh community. So I brought a motion. I was like first of the people in Canada to bring a motion to council that was condemning the Bill 21, but also standing in solidarity to the Quebec people. And this was very important because despite the perception that passing of Bill 21 is not a local concern for cities outside of Quebec and across Canada, it is very important to understand such legislated motions that attack body autonomy do in fact have triple effect outside of jurisdiction that is considering the motion. And we have already seen reports of harassment, xenophobia, and racism in public spaces. And we've seen like a case that a mother and her 2 old daughter were viciously harassed for speaking a language other than French in the same province that passed the bill. And we've seen similar incidences in Vancouver, in other cities where Muslims, especially Muslim women, because they're more visible because they wear the hijab, has been harassed. So when government passed bills, it really has effect in other places. In Vancouver, young teenagers were attacked in public on a public transit in a discriminatory way because they were speaking other language again. And we know that passing such discriminatory bill that target a specific group of people in the name of neutrality is coded way of stating confirm or go back to where you came from. So in other ways, when the government passes such legislation, somehow they're saying go back home, you know, and we've seen that a lot of people left Quebec because if you were starting becoming a lawyer and you were wearing hijab, then all the years you've spent in school, now you're not able to do that because you're not gonna do that profession. Do you have to leave them what you've studied and do another thing? And that's why it already displaced people within Canada. So the Bill 21 is a human rights and displacement concern because what happens to those residents that are being forced to choose between their body autonomy or working as a teacher, as urban planner, or engineer, or a judge in the public sector. They're pushed out and they do become internally displaced their own nation due to discriminatory laws and have to seek peace and security elsewhere provinces potentially. So that is the reason why I brought such motion, although it has a lot of backlash and I have received a lot of hate emails and other emails or phone calls, people telling me, stay your lane, this is not a municipal issue. And it was advocacy motion. It was just standing in solidarity of what's happening at Quebec, what's happening to the Muslim, Sikh, and Jewish community in those. So sometimes in the spaces we are, it's really important to use those spaces and your influences, how you could be in solidarity, even if you know it's not going to be the most popular, even if you know it's gonna be, you're gonna have a backlash. So on the top of that, when you're Muslim and Black, and you are in spaces where you feel like you want to educate, and the space you are, how inclusive are we? Are the Black and Muslims are welcome? Do they feel safe? Do I need to speak? Do I need to step up? How could I have a solidarity? So I think it's really crucial that we get out of our comfort places and really speak to the truth to the power, wherever power space you are, as long as it doesn't risk your livelihood. And sometimes we've seen that when racialized people speak, and that they risk a lot. And when you want to address like Black issues, it doesn't mean that other racialized people of color do not face prejudice and oppression. They do. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of Black people are being killed. So, and just question, when you enter a space, what privilege do you enter with, and how could you use that privilege in terms of being in solidarity and making sure that you create that inclusive, safe space. And just to conclude, I think, again, I will go back to the fact that I said, having the joy is a very radical. And I remind myself sometimes, the work I do is a very difficult work, because I touch on issues such as police accountability and things like that. And when we talk about police, it's not only for Black, but it's also for Muslims and unhoused people, trans people, Indigenous, people of color. So when you build solidarity across marginalized communities, but also then how do you have joy, like the Eid joy, where the Black young Muslims were dressing up? How do we come to dance? How do we come and have dhikr and drums or recitation of Quran? Or even how do you occupy, reclaim public space? Like yesterday, I was at an event, and it was a prayer time, and we prayed at the park, at the public space. And it felt good that some other people that I met for the first time, we shared that intimate space, we prayed together, and really, really reclaimed public space. Because public space should be for everyone. But, and that's why for me, now being in local government, other things that I question is, how do we create public spaces? How safe are the public spaces? How inclusive is it? Do people really find joy and safety at our public spaces? So I will remind us that simple as saying Assalamu alaikum, extending that peace, extending that smile, and keeping the joy alive, because in these times that is difficult, that is sometimes you feel like you've lost the hope. So I would say keep the hope, keep the joy, because that is the most radical thing we can do. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Councillor Dubow. That was such a heartwarming speech. I really appreciate your comments about peace, first of all. So on behalf of the panel and our viewers, I would like to say wa alaikum assalam, and upon you be peace, dear brother. I really like that you start and you finish with that, because in the Indigenous way, we also believe very strongly in peace. And I think our history, the history of the genocide, is a key marker of our open hearts and the way that we approached the visitors when the settlers first started coming. Of course, we greeted them with peace. And I think we still do that today. We didn't end up in the best situation with their arrival, but I think we're come a long way, and we're moving past that. My grandma did tell me a story I want to share with you, Councillor, and the viewers. She said, you know, if you ever watch a cow, she raised cows when she came with the family. She raised cows, and she said, if you watch a cow, they don't just walk past another cow. Always they will say hello to the next cow. They'll look at them, or they'll brush against them. They'll do something to indicate hello. So it is very important, and thank you for the reminders of greetings and your speech. Thank you, and may you have a wonderful day as well, Councillor.
Thank you, Hashka.
Hashka. Yes, I think it's really interesting, some of the stuff that Councillor shared, because I have my own experience as well with struggling with privileged people in Canada. Obviously, as an Indigenous woman, I faced racism myself, and I can relate to the Black community, as well as I relate deeply to anybody who's experienced oppression or racism, or any form of assault or attack on the person. I've had an experience myself on the job site where I was working with a whole group of immigrants, and they outnumbered us for sure. There was maybe 2 or 3 of Indigenous people on the site. And I remember very distinctly the moment when one of these immigrants said to me, "Oh, why don't you go back to your homeland?" And I thought, wow, that was my aha moment when I realized that first generation immigrants, as well as first generation Muslims, weren't aware of the land they were on. I was told to go back to my own country, and here I'm on my own land. So that's where I started realizing that some awareness needed to happen. And I do believe that, I mean, my Indigenous community will agree with me that unless you're a tribal person born in and of this land since time immemorial, you're a migrant. Everyone's a migrant. Sure, if you were born in Canada, you're a Canadian citizen, but we existed, and this land existed before like any Canadian government or any structural systems like colonialism and such. So I appreciate that, and I ask that we all find peace, and that we seek union as we examine and reflect on our own experiences of racism and oppression. So thank you, Councillor, and again, greetings upon you. And I'm going to move forward now with a video message. If, dear brother, if you could shut your video off. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to move on with a video message from Simon Fraser University's interim director, Azadeh Yamini Hamadani. She is from the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies.
Hello and welcome. We're delighted that you've joined us. As the interim director of the Center of Comparative Muslim Studies, it is my pleasure to introduce the exciting events we have planned for this October's Islamic History Month. We hope that you will enjoy a program meant to commemorate and celebrate the presence of Muslim communities and cultures in Canada. While our current pandemic prevents us from meeting you in person and from gathering together, it does not prevent us from virtually celebrating Islamic History Month with you and with Muslim communities across the country. Please take a moment to check out IslamicHistoryMonth.ca where you will find full calendar descriptions of national events, including talks, screenings, poetry recitals, art workshops, and more. The theme of our program this year is joy and solidarity. While each of us defines these terms in our own unique ways, the Persian poet Saadi provides us with a beautiful definition of solidarity. According to Saadi, all human beings are in truth akin. All in creation share one origin. When misfortune pains one, disquiet befalls all. If unperturbed by another's grief you remain, thou art not worthy of the name human. For Saadi, solidarity is the very basis of what it means to be human. In solidarity and joy, in the course of Islamic History Month, we hope to connect and learn from each other. I would like to express my gratitude to the elders who have joined us. I acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I would like to acknowledge our ancestors and the generations of those who have come before us who stewarded this land. I'd like to thank our MC, Jabala, Councillor Boyle, and Councillor Dubow. Many thanks to the Vancouver Public Library, the Vancouver Art Gallery, the City of Vancouver, the Vancouver Ismaili Center, Massey Books, and Mavens Media for partnering with us for this year's celebrations. Last but not least, none of this would be possible without the hard work and dedication of the CCMS team. Aslam, Yara, Arthur, Alyssa, and Janine Mary, I am honored to work alongside you. Thank you all for attending today's virtual Zoom event. Thank you for making the time in your busy schedules to join us here this Saturday. This wraps up our morning. We hope you will join us again. Thank you and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Azadeh, for that warm extension. I do hope that you all can tune in to the Islamic History Month.ca to check out those events. In my tongue, there is no word for exclusion. My elders always said that all my relations was how we end our prayers. It's also how we address when we say good morning, or if we ask God for any goodness, we always say for all my relations. And this includes all of humanity, but also the insects, the animals, the beasts that swim in the water, everything that exists upon this earth. So at this time, I really want to invite all of you to join in the events throughout the month. Especially, I want to welcome all tribal nations of Canada, of Turtle Island, to tune in. This is a very important month, and I do believe we have so much to learn, and in getting to know each other, we can really grow as a nation, a Canadian nation, but also as a spiritual nation of brotherhood, sisterhood. I personally want to thank my brothers and sisters, my Muslim brothers and sisters, for acknowledging their true host communities, the tribal nations of Canada and across Turtle Island. I would like to invite those First Nations people, the Indigenous people, as well as my Muslim brothers and sisters to pay close attention this month and really take to heart the efforts that's gone into this event. I know in the Islamic way, we talk about good deeds and bad deeds. And this is, if you've ever watched any old Western movies, you'll hear some of the old chiefs in there talk about having a good deed, and they might be taken to the happy hunting grounds. Now the happy hunting grounds, that represents paradise. They say happy hunting grounds because in the paradise we'll have everything we could dream of. So to a hunter or to a tribal person, this means when they go hunting in paradise, there will be so much game, so many wildlife, any one of their choosing. So deeds is linked to us attaining that paradise. And I really want to say to my Muslim brothers and sisters, Kukstap, step. That means that you've done a good job, a good deed. This is where I want to conclude, and thank you all for attending and making your good deed this month and throughout your life in connecting with the Indigenous people in your communities. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and you check out the chat box, as there will be some links to how you can join in to the events that will be happening. And I want to say thank you to Aslam for this invitation to sit with the panel today. And I look forward to seeing you all later in the month, myself as well as myself and Rizwan and sorry, Rizwan, I was going to say Aslam, but myself and Rizwan will be hosting another event regarding sacred spaces, which I think the Indigenous community as well as the Muslims will find very interesting. So thank you again, and assalamu alaikum.